I'd like to invite everyone after the service to wander your way, maybe after lunch, during lunch, before lunch, whenever you want. Please make your way to the second floor to see an exhibit, a temporary exhibit that's here at Holy Blossom Temple to celebrate the 100th anniversary of JIAS, of the Jewish Immigrant Aid Society. JIAS asked Holy Blossom if we would host this exhibit, which is actually sponsored by the Government of Canada. And we were invited to participate this way because Holy Blossom has been doing the work of welcoming and resettling refugees for more than 100 years. It's really since our founding in 1856. So it's really our pleasure to host this exhibit that talks about not only Jewish refugees, not only Jewish volunteers who resettled refugees from all over the world, but really following the storyline of the history of Canada with regard to refugee relief. Now, I grew up in an American Jewish family that loved Thanksgiving. We would precede the kosher turkey feast with personal expressions of gratitude, and we would then make a motzi. There was nothing inconsistent for us about our Jewish and American identities on Thanksgiving Day. It just fit together. We'd often attend the ecumenical Thanksgiving services in our New England town. Those services rotated each year from the Protestant church to the Catholic church to the synagogue, and they always ended with a rousing and sincere rendition of God Bless America. One of my American-born grandmothers tells the story that when she learned about Thanksgiving in kindergarten, she came home to ask her parents if they could celebrate the American holiday. And her parents agreed, but my great-grandmother, who was also born in America, decided that their Thanksgiving would need to be Jewified somehow. So instead of making an indigenous American turkey, she served a goose. Now, I don't know how a goose is any more Jewish than a turkey, but it probably had something to do with a nod to Europe, to where she had come from, my great-grandmother. They were extremely proud to be Americans and embraced every opportunity it afforded them, not only to advance the quality of their own lives, but also to serve their country. And their Jewish identity was, I would say, still dominant. Their Jewish and Zionist ideologies were still dominant in their daily lives. If they were asked, are you a Jewish American or an American Jew, meaning if they were asked which is the adjectival descriptor and which is the core subject of your identity, I believe they would have answered that they were American Jews of European descent. So the question still holds, how do you identify yourselves? And how do your children identify themselves? And how do your grandchildren identify themselves? Are these identities distinct one generation from the next? Are there changes in the patterns that you see? Since coming to Canada in 1998, I've noticed an evolution in congregants' approach to Thanksgiving. And I would say it's a pretty dramatic change in just 24 years. When Adam and I first arrived, congregants thought it was interesting that we traveled back to New England each year religiously to be with our families for American Thanksgiving. Congregants would say, yes, we understand, it's an American thing. What they didn't say out loud, but what seemed to be implied, was that Canadian Jews associate Thanksgiving with Christian observance. There was something about it that made Canadian Thanksgiving not their own. In time, however, maybe 10 years later, I noticed that congregants started to attend Thanksgiving dinners here in Canada as guests, or they would even host their own, especially if they were lucky enough to have a cottage where the leaves were changing and were in full colorful array. I don't know if this shift is an American influence or if it has something to do with the rise in Canadian pride, or simply the passage of time that allows for folks who came from somewhere else to feel at home with the minhag hamakom, with the customs of the place in which we live. Now fast forward to this year, when Canadian Thanksgiving fell on the first day of Sukkot, Yontef, Chag. I noticed that many congregants were celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving with multi-generational Jewish families gathered around beautiful Thanksgiving tables. I saw photographs on my Facebook feed. And beautiful, lovely, and yet there was no mention of Sukkot, at least not in what I could see or read. There was no sukkah, there was no lulav, there was no etrog, there was no shul, there was no hallel. And this is a mistake that needs to be corrected. Yes, of course, we can make room to incorporate civic holidays into our own calendar. I delight in them myself, but we must not let them crowd out our own sacred holy days. There's a difference between a holiday and a holy day. The sad irony of this evolution, and I'll be curious to hear at the Kiddush if you agree with this shift over the years, the sad irony of it all is that the pilgrims who first established the first Thanksgiving based it on the feast of Sukkot. They certainly knew their Bible, and they were inspired to recreate a harvest festival in their own time. Our Torah portion tells the story of the world's creation. Our Haftarah records the prophet Isaiah introducing God as the one who created the heavens and stretched them out, who made the earth and all that grows in it. An expression of thanksgiving is the celebration of the natural world and its harvest. But Isaiah doesn't stop there. He draws a connection between God's creation of the world, which was created to fulfill a specific task, and Isaiah connects this to God's creation of the Jewish people to fulfill their specific task. That is, we must rejoice in God's creation, which is universal for all peoples, for all creatures, but we must never lose sight of our own particular identity. Jewish particularism must never be lost in the pursuit of universal aims. Moreover, the particular paths of Judaism are how we participate in striving for universal aims. God says through the prophet Isaiah, I will bring your offspring from the east, I will gather you in from the west. Be sure that I am God, and I alone can deliver you. No matter where we make our home, no matter where we make our home, God is there. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash, Isaiah urges. Sing a new song in every time and place to make it so. One of the people our congregation is mourning this past year is Professor Irving Abella, Alav HaShalom. One of the most authoritative voices on Canadian Jewish history, Professor Abella was a real friend of Holy Blossom Temple. He was with us here on Yom Kippur 3 years ago when his wife, Justice Rosalie Abella, came to receive the Rabbi W. Gunter Plaut Humanitarian Award. And when we asked Professor Abella if he would honor us by writing a brief history of the first 150 years of our congregation, he did not hesitate. And furthermore, he insisted that his research and writing be received as a gift to Holy Blossom. Professor Abella got right to work in our temple archives, and now you can find that brief and colorful essay that he wrote bound at the back of our prayer book, Siddur Pirchei Kodesh. Now, as the editor of the prayer book, I was bold enough to suggest to Professor Abella that there might be a summative comment that might come at the end of his well-researched essay. and to my surprise and delight, he included my suggestion. There it is written. It could be said that if Holy Blossom's first century was concerned with how to raise Jewish children to become Canadian, its next half century was concerned with how to raise thoroughly Canadian children to be Jewish. When we gathered for the first day of Sukkot, we honored Canadian Thanksgiving. In this sanctuary, we said a prayer for this country, as we just did again today. And I hope that congregants who gathered around Thanksgiving tables set that table inside a sukkah and took up the lulav and etrog and made a motzi, maybe even a kosher turkey. These ritual mitzvot, unique to the Jewish people, must never be overshadowed by our commitments to civic society. When we claim them, understand them, and honor them, these symbols of our Jewish particularism, in fact, strengthen our commitments to the universal. The sukkah built by our ancestors in the wilderness are now symbols of inclusion and hospitality. It is to be a sukkat shalom, where all are welcome to come and celebrate God's creation and to share and our shared humanity. The symbol of the sukkah makes us mindful of the wanderer, like the exhibit upstairs. The sukkah tells us, pay attention. Notice the one who is exposed to the winds of life. Notice the vulnerable whose home is shaky and precarious. We feast in the sukkah of Thanksgiving so that we are fortified to go out to house the unhoused, to feed the unfed, to give asylum to the refugee who has been driven from his own home. With all this in mind, I urge you to get out the vote. This Monday, Toronto is one of the world's great cities. Toronto is North America's fourth largest city, and we have weathered pretty well through the pandemic, but it also has taken a toll in many areas of city life. You see it. Many areas of family life, you feel it. And so I ask you, when you're considering how you will vote, and keep in mind how our ancestors who were new to this good country would dress in their finest to go vote. It was considered a great honor to be able to participate in such a freedom. So when you are casting your ballot, I hope you will think through all of the issues on the table today and think them through using a lens of religiosity. Because how we treat the environment is a matter of religious concern. Healthcare is a religious issue. The crisis in mental health care must be answered with a religious voice. Education, poverty reduction, this country's policy on refugees and migrant workers, these are all deeply religious concerns. And coming into clear focus now, the work of truth and reconciliation, it too is sacred work. Indigenous rights are a religious concern. So let me conclude with a prayer for voting, written by Rabbi Shana Goldstein Mackler. Hineni, here I am, prepared to engage in the mitzvah of voting. By casting my ballot, I act out the values of my faith and my tradition. My vote is my voice, and my decision is my declaration of participation in the life, needs, and future of my country and my community. I recall with gratitude the sacrifices of those who came before me, recognizing that voting is my right and my responsibility, and I am committed to ensure that right for others as well. May I enter the voting booth informed and engaged, and may I emerge from the voting booth confident in the values and principles of our democracy. May I respond to the results of the election with respect, civility, and humility. And may this sacred act of civic duty be only the first step in engagement and never the last. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'tzorchei hatzibur be'emunah. Praised are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies our lives with particular mitzvot and who commands us to address the needs of our city, our province, our country, and all the world in good faith. Amen.